Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, how many different ways can you say redistricting and gerrymandering that's going to start the program? And we have a bunch of other interesting stories we'll get to. As they say, let's get to it.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, we're going to have a really interesting show this weekend for you, depending on where you're watching it around the state of Pennsylvania. I mean, some of these stories are almost beyond belief, but we're going to start with redistricting. Joining me, as often is the case, is sitting across from me is Steve Esack. He's with the Allentown Morning Call. And Liz Navratil, you're a freshman on the program, right? This is your first time. Well, welcome. Liz is with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and sitting next to me on my right, that would be your left, is what's his name? Marc Levy with the Associated Press. Marc's a regular on the program, and we appreciate it. All right, Marc, I don't even know where to start when we're talking about redistricting. And as you know, we're taping this, and we could get a response from the United States Supreme Court. Well, bring the highlights about what you think is important to our viewers as we enter what we think could be the final stages.
Yeah, so bottom line, the U.S. House races are a big deal this year. The Democrats are hoping to take back the U.S. House. The Republicans in Pennsylvania are hoping to have the state Supreme Court's redrawn map of House districts thrown out by the federal courts. As you have probably already told your viewers, the state Supreme Court a week ago threw out the state's 6-year-old map of congressional districts, calling it an unconstitutional partisan gerrymander, and redrew it. Right. And Republicans say its redrawing of that map violates the U.S. Constitution. Yeah. So here we go, Liz. I mean, the 18 congressional districts, millions of Pennsylvanians are going to have a new member of Congress. Now, perhaps a smaller number of millions would have one anyway because 6 members of the delegation out of 18 are not seeking re-election. And I mean, literally, when you look at the new map, let's forget about whether it's gerrymandering or not. I mean, when you look at it, you're going to say, oh my gosh, we've got this primary coming up on May 15. How is anyone going to make any sense out of this? What district are you in? What does it all mean? Take it.
So what they did is they've deleted the Disney characters for the moment, if this new map stands, and a lot of the districts are completely renumbered. Right now we've seen sort of a county level, big picture division of things, but if you're from the Pittsburgh area, you have something like 130 municipalities just in Allegheny County alone. So we expect in the coming days to get a more detailed breakdown from the Department of State that'll let people really hone in. Know what
borough or township where you're physically located in what district. So we can sort of guess, but you're saying you get into these areas where you can't, right?
Exactly. If I look at Allegheny County, which includes Pittsburgh, I mean, there's a joke out there, if I throw a stone, I'm in a new town. Yeah, well, we used to say you get down a street, and on one side of the street, and you're in one district. All right, picking up on what Marc said, I don't think there's any doubt that the Democrats are very excited about this, and that the prospects for them picking up looks like at least a solid chance for 3 and maybe 2 more. Now, you've studied this for a number of years. What's your take on that?
Well, I think the Democrats are salivating for a lot of the seats in the Lehigh Valley. What used to be the 15th and stretched all the way out to nearly Harrisburg is now back to its more traditional location of sandwiched in the Lehigh Valley, and it goes up a little bit into the Poconos. And then you have some other districts in the Philadelphia suburbs that Democrats are also eyeing as more favorable to them in past years. That still doesn't mean, though, that Democrats still have to do a better job. If these maps stand with the U.S. Supreme Court challenge, Democrats still have to do a better job of campaigning, getting the candidates and that sort of thing, which they have not done a good job of doing in past elections and in several districts. Yeah. So,
well, Marc, to pick up on what you said, nationally the Democrats have to pick up 24 seats. Some of the national estimates I see that it's going to be impossible or virtually impossible, but who knows in this crazy election year. They need 3 seats from our state. Now that, as you point out, that seems, as he just pointed out, that really seems doable now. And, you know, we're not predicting who will win, but you just look at the composition. Montgomery County would be one where they're likely to pick up a seat. Pat Meehan, who's old seventh, go ahead, take it.
Yeah, no, look, it may have been doable under the 2011 map. This is it's a crazy year. There's a lot of members of Congress not running again, so there's open seats. Democrats demonstrated in the last November's election that they are really energized. They won a lot of local seats in the Philadelphia suburbs.
Right. That's right.
So this new map that the state Supreme Court drew does help Democrats, but we should be clear that they were throwing out a map drawn by Republicans in 2011 that was widely viewed as among the nation's worst gerrymanders.
Oh, absolutely.
And the independent analysis I've seen says that this redraw squeezes out much of the partisan gerrymander. It does not gerrymander it the opposite way towards Democrats. It brings it back towards the middle.
But we're still in this fundamental question that the Supreme Court of the United States has not ruled that gerrymandering per se, politically redrawing the boundary lines to favor one party or another, is unconstitutional. You have a couple cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the difference was it was always to the victor goes the spoils, and that way gerrymandering was okay. But now in the 2011, that was really when technology took hold and made these maps, allowed the party in control, whether it was the Republicans in Pennsylvania or Democrats in Maryland, to zero in and really pinpoint these maps. And I think that's what the U.S. Supreme Court is going to look at in these cases involving Wisconsin and Maryland. Here in Pennsylvania, when this Republicans in the state legislature are going to the Supreme Court to try and strike down this new state map, they're arguing that what the state Supreme Court did violates the elections clause, which says the legislature has control of the map.
We're going to run to a quick break. When we come back, what does this mean for you? We've got this truncated timeline to file, and believe me, the May primary is coming. What's this all mean for millions of Pennsylvania voters? Liz, you're on deck. You're going to help us understand that. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back. Well, we have three of the state's leading reporters. We're talking about gerrymandering and redistricting, and we're going to get to a couple of topics. You're going to sit back in your living rooms or wherever watching this program and go, "Oh my gosh!" All right, Liz, this truncated time frame. What should the voters, what should folks out there know about this? I mean, it's coming fast.
So realistically, I think we're probably in limbo for days or weeks, depending on how quickly the courts handle this appeal and any others that come. After that, it's a matter of figuring out who your candidates are, which we'll know when they file petitions, and which district you're in, which hopefully we'll know in a couple days at least where you would be between the two maps.
Right. So you had a comment. Do you remember we were chatting about it on break? Do you remember what you want to say?
Yeah, so I mean, to the extent that voters are still figuring out which district they're in, so are candidates for Congress. When the state Supreme Court put out its map that it wants to impose for this election, every incumbent who's running again was in their own district. But there are tons of people running this year. This is a crazy.
More than 60 you wrote it. We have to be close to 70 if not above it.
It's over
70 people running for Congress.
Which is, if you look back at the primary ballot in 2016, there were about 40 on it. So that shows you how much interest there is. There's a lot of open seats. There's a lot of interest in running, and a lot of these people are now
not in the district.
They're in a different district where there is an incumbent incumbent. Maybe they were running for an open seat, or they're now in the district with the incumbent from their own party, and some of them are thinking about moving so that they can run in a different district and say, hey, I live here. It's created upheaval.
Well, the classic example is the special election in the 18th congressional district out where Liz's paper is based. Both of the candidates will not live in the new district. I mean, you can't make this up. All right, before we get to a couple of things that I want to talk about, there is at least a hugely important debate going on around the country on gun control, Steve. How much, it's been a tough road for gun control advocates in the Pennsylvania legislature. What's percolating as we speak, given what happened in Florida and the demonstrations? Go ahead.
Well, there's, as of yesterday, there's about 13 bills introduced in the House and Senate, most of them in the House introduced by both Republicans and Democrats for some measures of gun control. Some of the more some bills would ban, at least one of them, I should say, would ban assault rifles. Most of them, though, are all centered around like more money for mental health evaluations, more money for security in schools, be it a hiring cops or hiring some other people to have that, or putting in metal detectors. You put in metal detectors in every single school in Pennsylvania. There's more than 14,000 of them, from preschools on up to universities. That's an extra $14 million to $400 and some $million.
Okay, you've been covering legislature for a while. What's the prospects for any of these?
Oh, there's none. None. The last time I think the legislature did any sort of gun control measures was in the mid-'90s. That hasn't happened in a long time, and you've had a ton of shootings across the nation, mass shootings. Knock on wood, I don't think we've had any in Pennsylvania. So,
you agree with that? Do you think there's little chance?
I mean, it depends on what you're talking about. If we're talking about gun control, I have a hard time seeing something passing. But if you are talking about money for school safety, if you're talking about, say, potentially taking away someone's guns if they're a dangerous individual, I think the Wolf administration,
mentally ill, and however,
or if there's a protection from abuse order against you, there are prosecutors who are coming together on that, and the Wolf administration hopes that something can happen on that.
But you know, a lot of that is all money generated. I mean, there's barely enough money in this current budget or the proposed budget for existing programs. So if you're talking about hiring more armed people, who's going to get that money? You're going to put it in a grant fund, so this school over here might get money because their lawmaker has power versus somebody else someplace. So they need to find a funding tool.
All right, I want to go to a couple other subjects. I mean, this one, I'm going to let you explain. Tell the folks who Shannon Edward is and what's so unusual about her candidacy for Congress.
Sure. Shannon Edwards is from the western half of the state, and she is a forensic psychologist, but she's more known for her relationship with former U.S. Rep. Tim Murphy, who resigned amid...
You're talking about an affair that she had. Murphy's the congressman's married, and he left the post. He gave it up. Pro-life, right?
Yes.
He's pro-life and suggested she have an abortion, correct?
That is what we have found in our
Shannon Edward.
Yep. So to add yet another wrinkle into it, she's planning to run as a Republican in an area that is heavily Democratic. So it'll be interesting to see how that all weighs and how she's received.
Can you make this one up? I mean, you both have followed a lot. This is one of the more unique stories, isn't it?
Yeah.
Were you surprised at that?
Yeah, I was stunned.
Yeah, I mean, you too? I know you're all perplexed. We all are.
It is absolutely funny, you know. I mean, really. I mean, you know, she and Mr. Murphy had an affair. He lost his job because of that affair, and she wants a job because of that affair. So,
I mean, I know. Well, and she's running, as Liz accurately points out, against Mike Doyle, who, I mean, is it arguable how safe that seat is? Come on, they're safe. We're not picking. We're not. They're safe Republican and safe Democratic. How about it? Is that fairly, would you say safe?
So to add another wrinkle in, Rick Saccone would also likely be in that district unless he runs. So when we found out about the new districts, I think a lot of people looked at him and said, how does he have a shot as a Republican?
All right, we're going to run to a break. We're not done with these. We got a couple more that are going to surprise you. I think they will surprise you.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, welcome back to the program. Marc Levy sitting next to me. Liz Navratil is across from me, and so is Steve Esack. They're reporters. They cover lots of things in the state capitol. It's called politics and government and what goes on, particularly in the state legislature. All right, Steve, what in the heck is this stuff with alcohol and longevity?
Well, there was a study that the Chicago Tribune wrote about. That's a sister paper of the Morning Call. There's a University of California study that found if you drink at least two glasses of beer, 2 glasses of wine a night, you have on a percentage basis a better chance of living longer than if you exercise daily. It was an 11% increase. 18% increase
Really?
On the alcohol side versus an 11% increase on the exercise side. So I myself am on the cutting edge of science.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, that's all we need when we're encouraging people to lose weight and to stay in shape and to, eat healthy. But I've always heard that, drinking a glass or 2 of wine, right, is supposed to be healthy. You can't do it in excess, but that's all what previous studies have shown. And now,
Well, if I may paraphrase Homer Simpson.
Oh, Homer Simpson. All right, that's the first on Newsmakers.
Alcohol is the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
All right, let's go to a more serious matter now. Impeachment. We hear all the time of, lawmakers every now and then will introduce a resolution to impeach somebody. Lately, we've had the Supreme Court the Pennsylvania Supreme Court under the gun. Where does that all, and I always dismiss it because even though the legislature is Republican and, the Democratic Supreme Court 5-2, 4-3 on the decision, but we don't need to go there. What's going on with impeachment?
So the Republicans are extremely upset about the state Supreme Court throwing out the congressional map and drawing a new one. And one of the outgrowths of this is talk of impeaching the 4 Democratic state Supreme Court justices who voted to throw out the map and draw a new one for this election cycle. Right. So as far as I can tell from the House parliamentarian, there's only been one state Supreme Court justice in 200 years who's been both impeached and convicted in the Senate, because it's sort of a trial in the Senate. It's a long process. When this state Supreme Court justice was impeached and convicted, this was in the 90s, Rolf Larson, it took close to a year from the first vote in the House to the last vote in the Senate.
Right.
It's an enormously complicated process. It's time consuming. It takes lots of votes. But that's what's there is talk of that.
And just because somebody gets impeached doesn't mean that they're out of the office. You need a trial in the Senate, that's 2/3 vote. That's right. We know. Ask Bill Clinton about that. You can get yourself impeached, but doesn't mean you lose your job, right?
That's right. So you would still need a 2/3 vote in the Senate to actually eject the person from office, in this case the state Supreme Court justice.
Not likely is what you're saying. Even though the Republicans have 34 seats, if they got there.
The Republicans do have a veto-proof majority, a 2/3 majority in the Senate, but the question is are all of them on board with impeaching a state Supreme Court justice?
All right, we're going to come up with a final segment. I know you're wondering out there what we're going to come up with, but we'll get to that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Welcome back. Well, the final segment with a couple of the state's leading reporters. We had some light moments on the program. We're going to go back to a more serious one, and that has to do with this redistricting and what this all means. I'll go back to you, Steve, and then we'll go to Liz. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Mark mentioned earlier how some congressional candidates may not live in the district, and that could create problems. But it also creates a domino effect, because when state lawmakers announced that they were running for Congress, they were no longer running for their House seat in particular. So then you had some people come in to run for those seats. Right. Now, at least in the Lehigh Valley, State Representative Ryan McKenzie was only running for the congressional seat. Now he's running for both seats. But now he faces an incumbent challenge for that state seat, right, because someone else was going to be there. So there's this whole domino.
That's a wonderful point. And just so folks are aware, for Congress, you do not have to live in the district under the federal Constitution. You only have to live in the state. But if you don't live in the district and you run, or you end up with the C word being used, carpetbagger, it's not easy. Final word on redistricting?
Yeah, I mean, sort of to piggyback on that, already days after this new map, we have this awkward situation where people who were helping people's campaigns are suddenly competing against each other. So we've seen that in a lot of different regions, and that'll be something fun to watch as well.
Yeah. Where does all this go? Now, as we tape this program, we haven't heard from the United States Supreme Court. All of us have been wrong multiple times on this. It's hard for me to believe the U.S. Supreme Court really weighs into this.
So the constitutional scholars I've talked to have said that the Republicans face two problems. One is that the federal courts typically are unwilling to get involved in matters of state courts.
Right.
And another is that the U.S. Supreme Court previously has not held to a very strict standard of who must draw the congressional map in the state. And to the extent that Republicans now want to say that only the legislature in Pennsylvania can draw the map, that may be tough for them to get 5 votes in the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah, I think the whole thing, thanks, by the way, for coming in. This is all up in the air. The final chapter still probably has not been written, and who knows what the U.S. Supreme Court does ultimately in the cases that you referred to. If indeed they make a decision, it could affect what goes on in our state. If it's against the federal gerrymandering, against the federal Constitution. We're out of time. I want to thank you for giving up your time to come on the program. And we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.